Fucking hell. Here I did my whole like fucking intro. What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Twerkers, jerkers, lurkers, witches, liches, and bitches, blah blah blah. Anyway, as I was saying, like since it's already past the season, I'm not gonna bother coloring this piece because I'm just gonna move on to something else. And I'm gonna, once I post this to my galleries, if anyone is down to color it, you're free to do so. And it's the same for like all of my other art. Like I've had requests. Yeah, I deserve a bonk for that one. For not like realizing my fucking mic was off. I turned it off earlier because I was like recording a class session. God damn it. Anyway, I've had like several requests in the past asking me, you know, like, hey man, I really like your art. Would it be okay if I colored it? And like I've made several posts and journals effectively saying like, hey, look, if you want to color my work, you're free to do so, just so long as it's not like a commission piece from like somebody's OC. But if it's my own personal art, or if it's like my fan art and it's still like line art and you want to color it, then just fucking do it. I'm not gonna cause a hit, start up a hissy fit. So if any of my drawings catches your eye and you want to color it, just so long as it's not like someone else's original character commission, like otherwise, like fucking go ahead and color it up, man. It's cool. Anyway, I'm gonna start on the next piece. The next piece being like an OC piece. My darling Honey Floof wants one of her OCs drawn up in a like a goth attire. So I'm going to go ahead and start doing that. And this is a partial dono stream because like this is like a commission piece, but also like if anyone's down to like send me a donation, you can feel free to do so. And big shout outs to all those who did donate. Over the last couple of days, it really helped out a lot. Let's see, trying to look up the recent donations. Melody, of course, like my awesome soulmate and moderator, had donated, so big props to her. And I believe, I fucking hate these. Confirm that you're human. Yeah, I'm trying to like look up so I can give shout outs to the people who have donated. Okay. So big shout outs to Melody, Shecky42, MUQ. I don't know how to pronounce that. Is that a muck? Muq? I'm just gonna say Muq. And 2 coffee supporters. I have no idea who they are. Let me see. I know there's a way I can look this up. I can't remember how. But yeah, big shout outs and much appreciation go to those 5 individuals who have donated, and it helped out a lot. I was able to like do the family laundry, get like some much needed like little bit of groceries, and my sister was in some financial strife. I sent her a little bit of money, and it's helped her out a little bit, but she's, I gotta do what I can to like help her out too. But I don't know, like I gotta make sure I got my situation set first. So yeah, I'm still gonna be drawing for money. Like I'm still accepting donations. So if you're down for it, like feel free to do so. There's a donation link in the description section below. It'll take you to my coffee page, and there you can donate any dollar amount. Any amount will be much appreciated, and I thank you in advance. Awesome. You guys kick ass. Okay, let's get down to it. Okay, which OC was it? Was it Was it caramel? 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 Get my headphones on in case I want to start playing some stories. It's caramel. Caramel, you boob. Okay, you got it, love. All right, let me, I don't know, pull up some spoopy stories to listen to in the meantime as I get like a sketch going. And is this going to be like just like the same as, let me pull it up. Is it going to be like this? Just like a simple pose, just to showcase the attire? I don't know. Yes, okay, cool. All right. Let's get to it and pull up these stories. Oh, what's going on in the woods? Yeah, sure, we'll bite.
Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast.
Hold on, that's kind of blasting me in the ear. Let me turn it down a little bit. Okay, and let me adjust the volume over on this side.
And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
I do a hell of a lot of hiking and camping up in the Alberta Rockies, specifically around Upper Kananaskis Lake and the Ghost Public Land Use Zone. Up at Three Isle Lake, I once saw with my brother and a friend what's sometimes called a jumper. We're coming down after having breakfast and packing up our camp, and this guy in a blue jacket comes sprinting past us. We thought nothing of it since plenty of people run the trails instead of camping like us. As we come around a bend, we get a straight view down the path to the cliff. There's this one really tall cliff that we have to scramble up a steep and tightly switchbacking trail to get up and down. It's as steep as a trail is allowed to get before requiring climbing gear. This guy sprints right off the cliff edge and keeps making running motions as he falls like it's nothing. We searched for over an hour and found absolutely no sign of a body from the top or bottom of the cliff.
Jeez.
When we reported it to the park rangers on the way home, they seemed spooked as hell but didn't do anything or seem concerned with going up there to look. I've since found out these jumpers are weird apparition things that are actually fairly common. There's plenty of reports of them in the Canadian and U.S. Rockies and other mountain ranges. You see some guy climbing a cliff face in the distance, or hiking a separate ridge, or passing you on the trail without you noticing many details, and then they casually hurl themselves off the cliff, sometimes contorting bizarrely or giving you some weird sign first. There will be reports of the same jumper on the same or very close cliffs throwing himself off over and over again spanning years or decades, and park guys learn which jump reports to ignore fairly quickly. I've also been called to in the forest. Up in the Ghost, my second or third time up there, my brother and I were camping in the back of my dad's truck waiting for the rain to pass or for it to get dark enough to sleep. Through the wind and rain, we start to hear a weird noise that sounds like a woman screaming. We look at each other like WTF and listen closer, and realize she's screaming a name. The screwed up thing is, when we talked to each other we realized we each heard her screaming our own names. He heard his, I heard mine at the same time. Beyond that, no one was supposed to be up there that knew us. Nope, we stayed awake till the rain stopped and the screaming died out at the same time, cradling my shotgun. We didn't sleep much at all that night, and noped out of there early the next morning. I've been told it was probably a fox or a cougar, but trust me, I know what both of those sound like and they don't scream names. The Ghost itself is kind of a messed up area in itself. The Ghost Valley, or the Devil's Gap Valley as it's sometimes known, is a weird place with a bunch of spiritual significance to the nearby Stoney Nakoda people. It's named after one of the mountains there, the Devil's Head. The story goes that because it's shaped so weirdly, Stoney people said that it was where the spirits cross over and try to collect their own. It's a weird-looking mountain that about halfway up turns into a vertical column ending in a nearly flat top. There's other similarly shaped mountains elsewhere in the North American Rockies with similar...
Hold on, my freaking tablet whited out on me. Yeah, instead of like going black, the whole screen went white. If I leave it like that for too long, it'll develop a halo that just takes forever to freaking fade away. Such a pain when it happens, and sometimes it happens over and over again. Anyway.
Reputation, such as the Devil's Tower in Wyoming. It's also really good hunting territory and a natural gateway up into the Rockies from the foothills, so the Stony and many other tribes have fought over it many times. On the right kind of night, you can see spirits climb down off the cliffs and pick over the stones of the riverbed looking for the bones of fallen warriors. I've never been out there on the right kind of night, so I can neither confirm nor deny this. However, basically any time I've been up there, everything I did felt a little off. There's this sense you're being watched a lot of the time, and other times it's more like something wants to hurt you, or if you do something, no matter how carefully, the worst case scenario is going to happen and you're going to hurt yourself doing it. It's a weird sensation. I also saw a weird-ass disappearing tree up there in a dead zone. So I was hiking this random little trail in the Ghost. There's thousands and thousands up there with no markings or planting, and I came up to a clearing. Another one of those weird things people see pretty often wandering about in the woods is when everything suddenly or gradually goes dead quiet. I notice everything is silent, and as I look around, the light has a weird quality to it. I remember the rocks and trees and shape of the clearing well. In the middle of the clearing is this squat tree, super huge around, but looks like it was broken off only 10 feet up or so. No sign of where the top went. It's got all these gnarled branches all the way up, which is weird because conifers typically lose their lower branches in this area because there's no light lower down once they get tall. The bark was kind of sort of healthy-ish, again weird because the rest of it looks dead and it has no needles to speak of. I take all this in, and then back out of the area at a controlled pace because you don't stick around when you wander into one of these silent spots. As I back out and get around a couple turns, the light goes back to normal and I start to hear birds and bugs again. I found a different fork and followed it around for a while before going back to my campsite. I returned a couple weeks later to the same campsite with a buddy of mine, and after doing some shooting we decided to take a hike. I asked my buddy if he wanted to see something weird. He said hell yes, so I tried going back. I took that same trail and tried to find the weird tree. I found the clearing after a while, same shape, same rocks, same trees, except the weird tree in the middle was gone, no sign it was ever there. No weird silence or light either, just a normal clearing. I know it was the right trail and the right clearing, but that tree was not there. Not that interesting or spooky, but it was more than a little disturbing. We just ended up going back to shooting after a while.
Someone shared this story with me via DM. I saved it in a text file. We'll share it below. Might be a bit messy, since I'll be sifting through it to keep only the relevant details. Maybe some of you will find it as interesting as I did. Summer of 2020. This happened to me and my friends, Trevor, Chad, and Paul. A legit Eagle Scout survivalist type. We'd all just graduated high school. This was back during the lockdown, and to be honest, we all just wanted to escape for a week and decided to rent a cabin together in the Chattahoochee National Forest. Bigfoot territory. We spent weeks prepping, getting food, organizing schedules, and just generally planning. The cabin was 2 stories. You had the main floor where we slept and a staircase that went to a second story. Up there you had a living space with a wall that separated the room from the stairs, so you couldn't see anything but could hear when someone was walking up. There was also a bathroom that was out of eyesight, also important later. Lastly, across from the cabin was a large stream. As soon as we entered the cabin, something felt off. We mentioned it almost immediately to each other, but we brushed it off and settled down for the night. We woke up the next morning to Paul asking if anyone had heard a dog during the night. We hadn't. He told us that he heard growling either in the corner of the first floor or just outside of the cabin. There wasn't a house anywhere that could be stirred.
Fuck. Come on.
He confided in me that he had woken up the
freaking
previous
OBS
night and seen the shadow of a dog at the end of his bed, growling. He said he just closed his eyes and prayed it was a sleep paralysis scenario and tried to pass out. I think we were all on edge that morning because Chad suggested going into a nearby town and everyone agreed right away, like they were also eager to get out of the cabin for a bit. But when we got back, the weirdness just continued to ramp up. At one point we all heard what sounded like one of the curtains being ripped off the windows, and sure enough we found a curtain not removed, but torn and tattered, lying on the ground. Since this happened on the first floor, we moved ourselves upstairs. When we reached the second floor, Trevor said he'd turned back and seen something downstairs that looked like a shadow watching them. Needless to say, soon after that we all decided to just bail on the cabin. The weirdness never let up. At one point we all heard an audible growl in the room with us and decided we'd had enough.
I was on a teen camp expedition in Alberta, Canada, to spelunk some local caves, when we decided to move off the beaten path and search another cave. It was very tight. We had to literally force ourselves inside. Once we got in, we walked through the cave for about 1 kilometer until we reached the end, where there was a flat wall. At the base of the wall, and up a steep slope, there was a 1 meter by 1 meter hole in the wall. I was the skinniest, so I volunteered to investigate. I put on the camp leader's headlamp and got onto my stomach and entered the hole, not able to move my hands more than 15 degrees to the side, and edged my whole body in with my feet. As soon as I got into that hole, I felt a presence watching me. Being a young lad, I ignored it and kept crawling into the hole. I traveled around 3 meters into the hole until there was a sharp left-hand turn. I shone my headlamp down the tunnel to the end and saw a pile of sticks and leaves and a dead end. I went in to take a look, still not able to move my body more than an inch in any direction except for forward. I picked up one of the sticks and realized that it was a human bone. At that moment, without telling anyone what I had seen, someone outside let out an absolutely blood-curdling scream. I backed out of the hole as fast as I could, and my head hit the roof of the cave, turning the lamp off. As soon as the lamp turned off, I saw 2 glowing eyes staring directly into my face. Instantly, 2 hands grabbed my ankles and yanked me out of the hole. We ran. The camp lady would not tell anyone what she had seen, and neither did I, because I didn't want everyone to think I was crazy.
I was asleep one night in November 2006 in my 2-bedroom, 2-story detached house on the Canadian Forces Base, Cold Lake, Alberta, Canada. At about 1 a.m. I was awakened by 2 human-looking beings coming from the direction of the window and approaching my bed. One was tall and slender, dressed casually, very neat and clean, with an aura that illuminated the room. He had short, fair-colored hair and light-colored clothing. He had a Nordic appearance. The light seemed to emanate from behind him and enabled me to see pictures on the wall in a room. The room was normally pitch black at night with the blind pulled down. On this being's right was a shorter, less visible being who didn't have an aura and appeared unkempt, not sure because he was less visible. They were talking to each other as they approached my bed. As they reached the bed, the taller being turned from the shorter being and spoke to me in a calm voice and said,
"Where are the stairs?"
Thinking to myself, where am I and why are there people walking here where I am laying down? I tried to assess the situation. I gestured toward the bedroom door to my left with my left hand in response to his question. They turned toward the door and walked through the closed door, which appeared open or see-through in the aura light, which made even the hallway and stairs visible to me. They continued talking to each other and walked down the stairs, and as they walked, their footsteps and voices faded and the light faded until there was complete darkness and silence. I was left wondering what just happened and wondering if I had left my downstairs house entrance unlocked. I thought to myself, of course I didn't leave it unlocked, and I thought, I'm not going downstairs to follow them. I was a little fearful as I didn't know what these beings were. During the encounter I didn't feel scared. It was only in retrospect I started thinking about what just had happened. I became a little spooked, but not enough to stop me from sleeping. They seemed nice, not angry or mean. I had a similar encounter about a year after when a similar being came through the closed bedroom window again. Again, I think they wanted to know where the stairs were. As they came through the window, they moved to the blind side and popped their head in and looked at me, like he recognized me.
Loves you too, honey kitty.
Came in. He approached the bed. There was only one this time. The beings weren't from another era or time period, or didn't appear to be.
This was back in the day of no cars for the poor folk in the Appalachians of North Georgia. My great-grandfather's friend was a richer man by poor standards, and thus had a horse. One day he was riding the horse through the state highway, which was a lonely road out in the middle of nowhere. Sun beating down on him during this summer day. The road cut this old farm property in half. On the left side of the road was a barn, and on the right side was the old farmhouse. It had been abandoned several years at that point, and nothing else but tall swaying cornfields. As he's nearing the house, he feels a weird, eerie feeling, but he doesn't pause until he hears a baby crying from inside the house. Now, there was no car in the driveway, no open door, no lights on. He deduced that if it was a baby, someone, maybe a young mother on the run or a kidnapper, was hiding out there. Either way, the crying baby made him pull up to the driveway on his horse, tie the horse up, and walk up the walkway. He was halfway up the walkway when the baby stopped. He paused, and then the sound started again. But this time the sound was coming from the barn. Thinking it was just wind currents or something, he strode back down the walkway, and across the highway, leaving his horse, and walked through the corn toward the barn. He was maybe halfway there, looking up and seeing nobody inside yet, when the noise stopped. Then the crying started again, but coming from the house. He bolted back through the corn and onto his horse, and spurted out of the property. The horse had been neighing and stomping, generally acting freaked, which it didn't normally do being an older and gentler horse. The friend told my grandpa that was the only time in that horse's life he'd spurred it, and it actually began to gallop away without any further persuasion.
I had a conversation with a Bigfoot. He speaks in images, but I'm used to that because I think in images and had to learn communication. I didn't speak until I was 5. I'm a weirdo and I'm not afraid of a lot of stuff. I've seen lots of crazy things over the years. Anyway, I was shown that Bigfoots are protectors of ancient facilities, sites, Earth, specific bloodlines of humans and stasis pods, which explains why the nuclear physicist would have been hated and then screwed with. He has been involved in some pretty shady crap, and it's obvious because of the fact that he knows and has experienced Bigfoots entering specific facilities. Bigfoots camouflage a lot because of us, and it's genetic, not technology, caused, and they can naturally affect frequencies, and this is why the hallucination, plus the text. Our phones are all waves, which are frequencies. He showed me that many Bigfoot are sealed into areas long ago, but the beings he was guarding had left about 10 years ago. Also to note, the park up the road where the Bigfoot was that I communicated with has land owned by none other than Queen Elizabeth. It's her personal property, which was gifted to her by our premier in the 1970s, when he had also created many parks here in Alberta, Canada. Every park seems to have some weirdness, as you know. Also, there are giant mounds in the park area, but not in the Queen's area. Bigfoot showed me that he didn't go to that area. If you walk all through the park, you will see trees ripped up and some upside down. But he lets me forage and leaves me be, no missing time, and my dog is always fine. Many people in the area have seen him. He is alone, and many avoid the park because they have bad experiences. Maybe if people were not douches who disrespect nature, then they wouldn't have a problem. They are very simple, but they see into you, and if you are immoral, then watch out, and that guy is lucky he came back. But clearly they want people to know because they have been making it more obvious why they show up. The government would never be able to see them, and they can be right in your home and you would never know. They are pretty powerful creatures who communicate telepathically with images and not words.
Be game warden in New England. Extremely boring. Doing my patrol route. Get a report that some drunk hillbilly was out in the woods firing off all sorts of guns. Had a few dead fawns with him, so guess this is my jurisdiction now. Head out to his location. See him stumbling around near the edge of the woods with an AR-15 in his arms. Blubbering incoherently. Go to announce my presence, guy turns around and sees me. Crooked ass grin spreads across his face. See some kind of figure slowly emerging from the woods behind him. Asshole puckers like it just took a shot of lemon juice when I see a huge hand reach out and grab the redneck. Doesn't even react to it. Gets physically pulled into a tree and absorbed into it. Not like he collided with it, just like he seamlessly slipped into it like it was some kind of jello. Get back in my car and drive tough, report it to my superiors. No one found any trace of the redneck besides the dead deer he left behind, his rifles, and ammo.
Back in around the early 1930s, my granddad was a biplane pilot while his younger brother was in the cavalry. Both Royal Canadian Mounted Police lieutenants at the time, the elder having 2 years seniority over the younger. They were stationed about 60 or 70 miles apart in Canada's northern wilderness. The cavalry brother, Mom's uncle, was in command of a small 30-strong contingent serving the area as paramilitary police force. He said one day the locals came in a group of 3 respected elders to file a complaint of an eerie shrieking sound in the night, and their sheep going missing. So he decided to take a small platoon of 5 Mounties and go to the village where the supposed happenings were taking place to investigate and intervene if need be. They stayed in the village for 3 days without any incident, patrolling the days and staying in the village by night. But the night between the 3rd and 4th day, a young chap came bursting into the village in to tell him that it struck again. So my great-uncle, as I may call him, took 4 of his Mounties, leaving one behind for liaison, and rushed to the scene. He and his troops heard the terrible eerie shrieking all right, and unlike the villagers who were huddling with fear, galloped toward the sound, following the military instinct of always go towards the sound of calamity. It was a reasonably moonlit night, and when they approached this rocky area, they saw the culprit. According to the exact description my great-uncle told me,
it was some kind of a bird of prey. Not possible to put a finger on the color due to the light condition, of course, but presumably some fuzzy dark reddish-brown.
It was perched on a rock shelf, and from what he judged was around as tall as me. I was 16 at the time he told me this story, and around 1.81 meters tall at that position. It paid no attention to the cavalry platoon, although the horses had been spooked and were snorting, neighing and shuffling with all the gear of the Mounties clattering due to all that movement, etc. His sergeant offered to shoot the thing, and great-uncle agreed, ordering to dismount and fire at will. However, the bird seemingly heard this and took to the sky. He described it as not simply bouncing up into the air and flying away like some sparrow or pigeon. He said it threw itself down from the rock shelf it was perched on, to a free fall while spreading its wings and flapping strongly until it gained altitude. He also added it took the creature some considerable effort to rise up and fly. He then estimated the wingspan to be around 3 to 3.5 meters. He said he didn't feel like killing the majestic creature, but since it caused loss of property, he thought of it as duty and ordered fire. He said since the Mauser rifles they were equipped with did not fire tracers, so he cannot actually tell how accurate the shots were, but at the end, the bird flew away, disappearing from sight in the dark. But after that night, the sounds and disappearing sheep incident ceased, so they must have seriously wounded it, causing it to eventually succumb, he said.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time. Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
In 2002, a U.S. Army patrol went missing in a very remote area of Kandahar Province, Afghanistan. Another patrol was dispatched on a search and rescue mission. One soldier commented on what they found. As we bent around this corner, you could see the opening of the cave. And then I see a lot of rocks, which is another oddity. And then bone matter. I'm not close enough to identify what kind of bones, but I did see what I knew to be a piece of our communications equipment. So instantly we're thinking ambush, maybe animal, could be anything. There was enough room in front of the cave, but it had a sheer drop off, but there was enough room that we got into a decent dispersal in case of ambush. Not long after they had gotten into that dispersal formation, they saw something emerge from the cave that caught them fully off guard. It was a man at least 12 to 15 feet in height. This is a monster. Red beard, his hair was longish, past his shoulders, a scarlet red. Dan runs at him and starts shooting, which broke all of us into reality, because it was surreal. While Dan is moving at him, another bro of mine is laying down fire and I start firing. He skewers Dan. He's now got him on this pike. It went through him. He's got him and he's coming after more. We all just clicked in. I don't know what it was, but I remember we were all like, shoot him in the face, shoot him in the face. He's taking multiple hits and he's still moving. Eventually, the giant was killed. A helicopter soon arrived and dropped some cargo netting. The larger helicopter came by, dropped a hook, and the giant was carried off. The soldier confirmed that the red-haired, fair-skinned giant had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot. After they had submitted their report, the soldier recounts that they were told by their top brass to edit it in a particular fashion, presumably to remove any mention of a giant being. Another special operations soldier in Afghanistan provides the following testimony to the incident, even though he was not a direct witness to the incident. We would come back to the base and start hearing this rumor about a unit that killed this, what they started calling this really tall person. At first I didn't think anything of it, then came to find out that the person they killed was actually 3 times the size of a man, had extra digits on their hands, and extra digits on their feet, and had red hair, and a special unit had come in and wanted this target. Well, we'd heard that they killed this thing inside a cave, or the mouth of a cave, and there was common knowledge among the military to hear this. When you first hear, you're thinking like, this has got to be a joke. This has got to be a hoax. Then after things go down a certain way, and you keep hearing it, you start to realize it's not a joke. This pilot had landed at a base in Afghanistan and was told that they had to pick up special cargo and that there were absolutely no cameras allowed. The pilot describes the cargo. It was basically a dead guy, and this guy was extremely large. And when I say large, our pallets are basically, if I remember correctly, about 9 by 12 feet or so, and this guy was laying in a fetal position on the pallet, and he filled the pallet. He was around an 11-pound guy. The pilot corroborated much more of the details given by the other 2 witnesses, including the fact that this giant was fair-skinned, red-haired, and had extra digits on his hands and feet.
Now this account is not my own, but was told to me by a Marine doing combat tours in Afghanistan. For the sake of his own job and security clearance, he has asked that I not give any names and never mention what region they were operating in. From my understanding, the individuals who were with him during the encounter were from a task force operating under orders for the CIA. Beyond that, I was told next to nothing. I will refer to him as Sarge if only to have a name. Anyway, here's his story. During a patrol checking on some local farmers, Sarge's unit was made aware of a deadly being living in a cave system near their farms. When pushed for more information, the locals were...
Hold on, dogs are barking at something. Yeah.
were only willing to say that this being was stealing from their farms and had killed a few people who had made the mistake of trying to protect their livelihood from it. Convinced the locals were being harassed by a group of Taliban fighters, half of Sarge's unit was sent out to investigate and either arrest or kill any hostile forces in the area. So, with a few Humvees armed with M2 machine guns, they went out to the cave where the mysterious being supposedly lived. Upon arrival, they noticed nothing of interest. There were signs that something was living in the cave, and the soldiers found animal bones scattered around the entry. Not wanting to risk his entire unit fighting in a cave that the enemy would know very well, Sarge sent his 2 fastest Marines to investigate. The 2 men just gave the others a cocky grin and a thumbs up before disappearing into the darkness beyond the mouth of the cave. For 10 minutes, there was nothing. Not a single sound inside or outside the cave other than the idle chatter of the bored Marines. Then sound erupted from the cave, shouting and screaming. In a matter of seconds, the 2 men emerged from the cave at a full run and zipped past their teammates, one of them shouting, "Run, just run." But like the hard-ass special forces operators they were, the other soldiers stood their ground, only to see a massive man emerge from the cave. He stood nearly 10 feet tall with leathery skin and red hair. In one of its massive hands was a log that it began waving at the soldiers in a very obviously threatening manner. Shocked, but not panicked, Sarge commanded his men to shoot it, and the 12 Marines opened fire. But the bullets seemed to be doing little more than pissing this giant off. Finally, in desperation, one of them fired a grenade launcher at the being, blowing out a massive chunk of its flesh, exposing a small portion of the ribs and ripping most of the skin and muscle off. The giant retreated into the cave, and the soldiers decided that the best thing to do was head back to the village and report to the rest of their unit. Clearly, this was more than a few Taliban militants. Even with that gaping wound, the giant was too terrifying for the Marines to willingly walk into its territory. So, they headed back and reported to their commanding officer. Of course, their boss didn't believe them and demanded to see proof, so that night, they drove him out to the cave and showed him some of the shredded flesh that had been blown off by the grenade launcher. From here, the report went up the chain, and nobody knows what was done about this creature. I wish he would have told me more. From what I've managed to find on my own, accounts like this are not uncommon in that part of the Middle East. Of course, since all of these reports were word-of-mouth stories, I don't know how factual they are or if they're being exaggerated.
It was the spring of 2007. My then boyfriend and I were on our way from New York down to Miami to go to a music festival. We were driving south on the highway along the east coast of Central Florida when we pulled into a rest area so that he could catch a nap. He had been driving all day when he decided that he desperately needed a short rest before getting back behind the wheel. We had very recently bought the van and he did not think that I could handle maneuvering it, so he was doing all of the driving. I later proved him wrong. He parked and jumped in the back of the van and laid down on the futon mattress that we had laid there. He told me to leave him alone and he proceeded to pass out from exhaustion. I was pretty freaked out because the rest area building was unmanned, locked up, and dark inside. The restrooms were closed. The small rest area building was surrounded by dark woods. There were about 4 other cars in the small parking lot but no sign of any drivers, so I imagined they were having an emergency laydown as well. Normally I would never have set foot outside of the van alone in such a scenario. My instincts told me not to get out of the van. But I had taken some Midol for my menstrual cramps and they had given me brutal nausea. I needed some pretzels. I mustered up all of my courage and opened the passenger side door and squeezed through the space between our vehicle and the vehicle that was parked directly next to ours. As soon as I had a clear line of sight to the front of the rest stop building, I saw the thing and saw it clearly. Straight ahead I saw the brightly lit front facade of the rest stop. To the left of the doors was it. To the right of the doors was a vending machine. Immediately, it communicated with me. I was flooded with what I consider a telepathic message from the being. I cannot be seen. I cannot be seen. I must travel by night and exist in darkness. I cannot be seen. I cannot be seen. I cannot be seen. And I felt an enormous wave of compassion for the being rather than fear, which may seem a more logical reaction to someone hearing this story. For some reason, my brain only categorized it as one thing initially, an outsider worthy of compassion and tolerance. Its skin was pure chalk white. Not the skin tone white, but the color white. Its eyes were several times larger than ours. It had 2 little air holes for a nose and a very thin mouth. Its frame was completely concealed by its enormous, long, black hooded robe. It looked as though it was quite gaunt underneath, pretty frail looking. It was sitting on its bottom, knees bent, back against the brick front of the rest area, to the left of the front doors of the rest area. It was sitting with its back very straight, tall, and erect. It seemed in awe of me, or maybe in awe that I was actually approaching it. It looked vaguely like a human, very vaguely. Its face was snake-like. Its eyes were right on me. I threw a little everyday smile in its direction and I did something strange. I continued to walk toward the rest area even after seeing it. I walked towards the rest area building, closer to it. I walked forward about 20 feet from the rear of the van to the rest area steps, up the 20 or so steps, and to the right, where the vending machine was located. My thoughts at this point were very bizarre in retrospect. I felt bad for the thing. I didn't want it to feel different. I know that sounds hilariously quaint if we are indeed talking about an interdimensional being, but I didn't want to run back into the van because I didn't want to hurt its feelings. I didn't want to make it feel like a freak. It had already told me that it could not be seen due to the way people would react, so I wanted it to know that I didn't judge it for the way it looked and that I was willing to come to terms with its horrific appearance in order to extend some humanity to it. I did not know about fallen angels and such at the time. So it was with that very bizarrely strong conviction to be righteous and humane to it that I walked toward the vending machine. I actually got pretzels. I'm telling you, my stomach was churning. I used the vending machine with my back to it. Pretzels in hand, I swiveled around to look at it again before descending back down the steps. It was at that moment that pure terror rippled through me. I was closer to it now, approximately 15 feet away, and I could see now that there was definitely no way that it was human. It was staring right at me like a wide-eyed insect. It was still in exactly the same position, except that it had turned its head to look at me better as my position changed. It looked like an alien. It looked like a demon. It was not human. Its huge, one-dimensional eyes did not have whites. They were almond-shaped, like the classic alien eye that we all know. It was then that I realized that it was extremely tall, unthinkably tall. Although I was standing and it was sitting, its head still stood taller than mine. Its huge eyes were fixed on me totally, with fascination, alarm, and with the most intense focus. Just like the way my cat looks at something right before she pounces on it. When I had made the decision to climb the stairs towards it and not to retreat to the van, I thought that it was sitting on top of something and that was why its head was raised up so high. Now, from this closer perspective, I could see that it was not sitting on anything but its own butt. If I had realized that it was this tall at the start, I very well may not have gone up the stairs. So, after the ripple of terror went through me, I responded by smiling the way you smile at a stranger when your eyes catch on the bus. I shot a casual, thin, innocuous little hey how you doin' smile. Why and how I acted as if things were totally normal, I cannot explain. I have never acted so cool in my life. If I were to guess what the thing was doing when I encountered it, judging by its body language, I would say that it was somewhat displaced and resting. But I have no clue, maybe it was in the middle of something far more sinister. It did not look like a mutant or an experiment. It looked ancient, timeless, and placeless. Graceful, horrible. It was also firmly in this dimension when I saw it. It was not a hazy vision in the slightest. The lighting was not dim. It was not even a remotely ethereal experience. The extremely bright lights that illuminated the front facade of the rest area building revealed every contour of this entity. If only I had been closer, I could have provided much more detail about its facial features. As I was walking back to the van, I quickly strategized about how to make sure that my fear did not paralyze me and prohibit me from getting safely inside the car. I decided not to look back, or even around me as I turned the key, because if I saw that it had moved or I saw it coming towards me, I would have been too terrified to manage with the car keys. I got in the van. I locked the door. I screamed that we needed to leave immediately. We did. As we drove away, about 90 seconds after it was last in my sight, I looked out the window and saw that it was gone. There was nothing where it had been. Just brick wall and concrete floor. I began to tell my boyfriend that I had just had the ultimate experience, and although he was a dude who was always going on about the Vedas and Madame Blavatsky and whatnot, for some reason his only response was a trite "we're in Florida, what do you expect?" He was an extremely abusive person, so I decided to leave it at that and not attempt to share any more with him. As far as the height of the entity, at first I thought that it was about 9 or 10 feet tall. Now that I am drawing a diagram, I realize that it was likely significantly taller. As I said, its head stood taller than mine, even though I was standing and it was sitting. I am 5 feet 2. That means that it was approximately 6 feet tall from its butt to the top of its head. From its butt to its knees may have been 4 or 5 feet, and from its knees to feet, 3 feet.
What the hell are these dogs barking at? Oh. My brother's home from school. Oh, he's just walking up the dirt way. Ooh, what? Oh, man, I'm tired. I've been fucking busy today. Busy all morning, early afternoon. Only just now got to get to streaming.
But that means that it was about 14 feet tall. I can hardly wrap my mind around that.
It was the winter of 1996. My friend Dejan and I decided to go on a trip into nature following his doctor's advice. The same as every Saturday, Dejan and I went for a walk to the mountain Fruskagora. We stopped by an Esremski Karlovci at Dejan's mother-in-law's. We had a cup of coffee and headed towards Zimajevek. It was a very cold and gloomy morning, and it seemed that it would start snowing any minute. Dejan's mother-in-law poured us boiled wine in a thermos, and it was very useful for us while we were climbing towards Zimajevek in that cold. We planned to go to Brankovac after we had reached Zimajevek, and then to Glavica. When we reached Zimajevek, we sat for a while, we had some rest and refreshed ourselves, and we agreed not to go to Brankovac along the mountain path, but to go through the untouched nature. After 5 days of sitting at the computer and writing invoices, receipts, and other documents, there is no better way to relax but to go into the wilderness, far away from any civilization and everyday life. We went off the path and headed through the thick wood towards Brankovac. I always carry a compass, so it was easy for me to orient myself, and I have a great help from the military topographic maps of the
I might need a nap later.
I had accidentally found a few years ago on the flea market in Novi Sad. The wood was very thick, so Dejan and I had difficulties getting through, and very soon we sat down to rest. May Dejan's mother-in-law be blessed, I thought to myself while I was opening the thermos with boiled wine. While we were having a rest and sipping that wine, we suddenly heard loud breaking of the branches coming from Brankovac. I was happy because I thought it might have been a deer or roe deer, which I had rarely seen during the last years on the Fruscagora. I hurried to Jan and we went towards the place from which the noise was coming. The wood was thicker and thicker and I was about to drop the search when I heard the crackling of the branches again. This time it was much closer than earlier. We ran towards the noise and soon we were on a small clearing. What I saw at that moment I would remember till I live. Instead of a deer or a roe deer on the clearing, a big man-like creature, almost 3 meters tall, awaited us. It was completely covered with thick, dark brown hair, and its hands were disproportionately big compared to his body, and they reached almost down to his calves. He was hunchbacked, broad-shouldered, and with a strong, short neck with a big head that resembled the head of a chimpanzee or an orangutan, but it was much wider and bigger. It had nothing but the strong, thick hairs on its body, but I did not manage to see whether it was a male or female. I could hardly resist screaming from fear, and when I looked at Jan, I saw that he was pale with fear and that he was staring at the creature that stood less than 50 meters away from us. We stood that way and stared at it for the whole eternity, when the creature suddenly noticed us. Upon seeing us, it screamed in a way that reminded me of the sound of a bear. I was frozen with fear, thinking that it would attack us. But, to my surprise, the creature hurried to the edge of the clearing, and it disappeared into the woods at incredible speed. It is almost improbable that such a big creature is capable of moving so fast and in such an agile way. When we recovered from the first shock, I suggested to Jan that we should follow it to find out some more details about it, but Jan would not even hear about it. Understandably, he was afraid that the creature might attack us, and deep in the woods there was no help. I was persistent, and in the end, Jan accepted to follow this unusual and unbelievable creature, though unwillingly. I was frightened, of course, but my curiosity was stronger than any fear. We headed towards the place from which the creature went into the woods, and we saw the trails there. They were clear, and it was visible that this creature had a thumb and 4 toes on his foot. I was definitely convinced that it was a man-like creature, not a wild animal as it might have seemed to us because of our fear. We continued through the woods, we followed the trails, and now and then we heard crackling of the branches in front of us. Every time the noise was quieter and quieter, we concluded that it was running away from us. We felt relief when we realized that it was scared of us the same as we were of him, but anyway it was useful to be cautious. At one moment we did not hear any noises, but we could still follow the trails. I was looking at my compass and I saw that the creature was constantly moving towards the northeast. After a few kilometers there were no trails. We searched the district thoroughly looking for the trails, but we found nothing. It seemed as if the creature had disappeared in the ground, or as if it had got wings and flew away. We were so confused that we spent the next few hours thoroughly searching the area, hoping to find its den, or at least a trail that could lead us further. But all our efforts were in vain. We could not find a trail or a hint that there was its den or hiding place.
It was already getting dark, and we had no other choice but to stop the search and to start walking back towards Stroomz Karlovci. Since my hobby is photography, I always carry a camera with me when we go for a walk around the Fruscagora. I am particularly proud of the series of photos of the monasteries on the Fruscagora, and I was hoping I would have another opportunity to take a photo of this creature. Unfortunately, there was not an opportunity, so I had to be satisfied with the photo of his trails in the snow. The largeness of his foot can be seen if you compare it with Esrata's shoe next to the imprint of the foot of this creature. When I used up the whole film, we walked back towards Stroomz Karlovci, quite hungry and frozen. We decided to get back to this part the next day and to try to trail this unusual creature. That is what we did, so we spent the whole next day wandering around the woods between Zimajevak and Jastrabak, but we had not seen either the creature or its trails. We were coming back to the same place during the next few weekends, but our search had no results. Maybe it is better that way, since I had the impression that this creature was not aggressive at all, and that it had only wanted to be left alone. Esrata. And I have definitely given up the search after the wild man from Vojvodina, as my wife calls it, after 2 months' time. But still, as we are walking through the woods of the Fruscagora, we react to every noise hoping to see this scary, but, as it seems to me, benevolent wild being.
Flesh-eating giants in Peru. As there is in Peru a story of some giants who landed on the coast at the point of Santa Elena, in the vicinity of the city of Porto Viejo, I have resolved to mention what I was told about them, as I understood it, without taking into account the opinions of the common people and their various anecdotes, for they usually magnify events larger than life. The natives, repeating a story received from their forefathers from very remote times, say that there came from across the sea on reed rafts that were as large as big ships some men that were so big that an ordinary man of good size scarcely reached up to their knees. Their members were in proportion to the size of their bodies, and it a monstrous thing to see their enormous heads and their hair hanging down about their shoulders. Their eyes were as large as small plates. They say they had no beards and that some of them were clad in the skins of animals, and others only in the dress nature gave them. There were no women with them. On reaching this point, they set up their camp like a village, and even in these times there is a memory of the site of their houses. As they found no supply of water, they remedied the lack by making some very deep wells, a labor certainly worthy of record, being undertaken by such strong men as these must have been, to judge by their size. They dug these wells in the living rock until they came to the water, and afterwards they built the wells in stone from the water line upwards so that they would last for ages. In these wells the water is excellent, and it is always so cold that it is very pleasant to drink. When these great men or giants had thus made their settlement and dug these wells or cisterns, they destroyed and ate all the supplies they could find in the neighborhood. It is said that one of them ate more than 50 of the natives of the land, and as the supply of food was not sufficient for them to maintain themselves, they caught much fish with nets and gear that they had. They lived in continuous hostility with the natives, because they slew the latter's women in order to have them, and they also slew the men for other reasons. But the Indians were not numerous enough to kill these newcomers who occupied their land and lorded it over them, and although they held great discussions about this, they never dared attack them. After some years the giants were still in this region, and as they had no women of their own and the Indian women of the neighborhood were too small for them, or else because the vice was habitual to them and inspired by the demon, they practiced the unspeakable and horrible sin of sodomy, committing it openly and in public without fear of God or personal shame. The natives say that our Lord God, unwilling to conceal so wicked a sin, sent them a punishment suited to the beastliness of the crime, and when all the giants were together engaged in this accursed practice there came a fearful fire from heaven to the accompaniment of a great noise, in the midst of which a shining angel appeared holding a sharp, bright sword with which he slew them all at a single stroke, and the fire consumed them leaving only a few bones and skulls, which God allowed to remain unconsumed as a token of the punishment. This is the account they give of the giants, and we believe that it happened, for it is said that very large bones have been found and still are found thereabouts, and I have heard Spaniards say they have seen pieces of teeth which they thought must have weighed 1/2 pound when whole, and who had also seen a piece of a shin bone of wonderful size, all of which bears witness to the truth of the incident. In addition to this, one can see the places where the sites of their villages were, and also the wells or cisterns they made. I cannot state whence or how these giants came there. In the present year of 1550, when in the city of Lima, I heard that when His Excellency Don Antonio de Mendoza was Viceroy and Governor of New Spain, certain bones of men as big as these giants, and even bigger, were found there. I have heard too that in an ancient sepulchre in the city of Mexico or somewhere else in that kingdom certain bones of giants have been found. Since so many people saw them and attest to having done so, it can therefore be credited that such giants did exist, and indeed they may all have been of the same race. At this point of Santa Elena, which is as I have said on the coast of Peru and in the
loves
district
you
of the
too,
city
honey
of Puerto
kitty.
Viejo, there is a remarkable phenomenon, the existence of certain wells or seams of pitch of such excellent quality that it would be possible to tar all the ships one wished with it, since it flows from the earth. This pitch must be from some seam passing through that place. It comes out very hot.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
It's painful
Remember
watching me
check
try
out
to
the
stay
Odyssey
awake.
page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.
It is okay, honey kitty. It's just been a long day. Started out pretty rough. Had to go run an unexpected errand. And then came back, had to tend to the animals. Then afterwards, had to go to class. Then after that, had to water the horses. Then after that, had to help mom prep, do dinner prep. Oh. Desert strangers.
Greetings, and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
First, I don't have all the details. There's obviously a greater story here, a bigger picture, and I've only had a small glimpse of it. An experience that lasted for only a few short minutes, with the event constituting maybe 45 seconds. But I can't explain what happened in those 45 seconds, can't wrap my head around it, or reconcile it with what I know about the natural world and life, specifically the potential for life's development when not checked by some ever-present environmental stressor or predator. A few years ago, I got a call from my brother in Arizona asking if I wanted to visit, maybe do a little hiking, eat at some Mexican restaurants he thought I'd like, etc. He'd just gotten some big bonus at work and wanted to spend it on some brotherly time. I had a few vacation days saved up at work, so I agreed and took the necessary time off. Nothing of interest happened on the way there, and we met without any issue. He showed me around Phoenix, Tempe, and Chandler, and treated me to some food. 2 days went by and we branched out in our explorations of the state, visiting Sedona and a few other areas. I was set to leave on the 3rd when he suggested that we end my stay doing something outside. We'd already gone hiking, but he wanted to do another outdoorsy thing since he knew I wouldn't be able to once I went back home, where the weather was snowy, rainy. We found a decent place to camp for a day in southern Arizona, somewhat near the border, not far off from where we had hiked the day before. With Arizona being a desert, there was plenty of land and open space for us to spread out our stuff and relax. The drive there, which lasted a couple of hours, gave us time to chat and listen to the few bands we mutually enjoyed. We brought the usual camping supplies, tents, food and water, flashlights, flares, a radio, etc. It was just one day, an evening, and a night, really, so we only brought the basic, for example, cheapest necessities. His truck was parked about half a mile away from the campsite to preserve the camping atmosphere, whilst keeping it at a reasonably accessible and visible distance. We spent most of the evening just talking, catching up on anything we hadn't covered the first 2 days, and eating the leftover food we'd saved from past restaurant dinners. There was no one else out that we could see, and the nearest road was about 2 miles from where we had parked the car. It was mostly flat desert in every direction, a cozy desolation. Around 10 p.m., just after we had finished dinner and gathered up our trash, we both saw something off to the north, about half a mile from camp. A mound in the desert, but one that moved, seeming to inch toward us every few seconds. Not continuously, but in steady lurches, as if the energy or effort for each motion needed to be mustered. The mound was the same color as the sand, but even from the distance we had initially spotted it, we could tell that it wasn't made up of sand. The surface, while sand-colored, was fuzzy in a way that was highly uncomfortable to look at for more than a few seconds. I remember turning to my brother and seeing him wince and rub his eyes. I'd had the urge to do the same. For whatever reason, a mixture of awe and fear, maybe, we stayed put, didn't move until the thing was only a few yards away. At that distance, the size of the thing finally registered to me. It was huge, an immense body that towered over us. I'm sure the sheer flatness of the area made it seem larger than it really was, but sitting before it, looking up at this wall of uncanny fuzziness, really gave the impression of enormity. I've spoken with my brother several times since then, and each time we try to recall and describe the thing, we come up with new descriptions. Not necessarily new details, but new forms, structures. We generally tend to settle on the admittedly odd description of a huge and dry washcloth. One that's been thoroughly used and left out for quite some time, scaled well beyond usable proportions. A haphazard shape, not necessarily formless, but spread out. Another description, one I offered, was a hideously blossoming flower. The ugly petals unfurled, some larger than others, but without any uniform center. There were no eyes, no feelers, antennae or identifiable sense organs. Only the massive, ever-mobile body. If given the means, the easiest way I could replicate the thing's overall structure would be if I were to take a ball of light brown clay or dough, pull at it in every direction, and then insert tiny, almost microscopic pins all over its surface. Thousands of them. Then, somehow, make those pins vibrate and give the dough itself a sort of buzzing, almost breath-like animation. I know it sounds ridiculous, but that's honestly the clearest idea I can give, the best reproduction of how the thing idled. We stared at it without speaking, both feeling something more than just basic fear. When it got really, uncomfortably close, I felt sick, not queasy or nauseous, but more like delirious. As if being in close proximity to it had caused some sort of sudden neurological issue. While I didn't recognize it at the time, looking back now, I'm certain that my mind had simply been unable or independently unwilling to fully grasp the thing's appearance. It was so unusual, so unprecedented. One of the parts, tentacles, tendrils, even the more general term appendages all feel weirdly inaccurate. Drifted by me in what could have been a missed attempt at contact, or simply another motion of self-propulsion, and I felt the space around me shift, get pulled away in the wake of the part. I was suddenly aware, acutely, intimately aware of the space I occupied, somehow became highly sensitive to the particles or whatever, and noticed, palpably, how the stuff of that space had been drawn away from me. This interaction, phenomenon, whatever you want to call it, scared me more than the sight of the creature itself. The revelation that it could somehow subtract or brush aside the elements, the essence of the air, was absolutely terrifying. I heard my brother utter and then quickly stifle a cry, and turned toward him just in time to see the passage of another part over his head, this one much larger than the one that had swept by me. The thing was now over us, and I expected to find teeth or a gaping maw or something like that beneath it. I think, at the time, I had mentally associated its appearance with that of an octopus, or a starfish, some multi-legged, water-inhabiting creature, but having thought about it a lot, I can confidently say that neither is close enough for a worthwhile comparison. Their anatomies are too ordered. But there was just more of the same beneath it. More of that pulsing, buzzing, prickly flesh, which was so disconcerting to look at it. Since it hadn't tried to eat or attack us, I got the idea that maybe it couldn't see or sense us, so I turned to my brother and mouthed, "Don't move." He didn't nod or mouth anything back, but it was obvious that he'd already decided to stay still, likely out of sheer terror. We've had our disagreements about the exact amount of time we spent beneath it, but agree that the thing's passage took between 20 and 45 seconds. It had felt much longer than 20 seconds to me, maybe because I was so hyper-aware of its bizarreness in relation to myself. I think my brother had been numb to his perception of time while the thing passed over him. It had obviously affected us differently. I didn't turn around immediately, actually waited several minutes before even turning to my brother. When I did, I saw him breathing slowly, rhythmically, obviously trying to calm himself down. I, on the other hand, was weirdly relaxed, at least in an immediate physical sense. Terrified, sure, but I had been so thoroughly scared by the thing's unwholesome and unprecedented nature that my mind essentially said, "The heck with it," and put me into a kind of blissfully apathetic state. Like, why even worry, why waste the effort of being hysterical, with something like that roaming around? Why run, you'll just die tired, etc. When we finally turned around, there was nothing to be seen. Just the same flat desert we had gazed upon earlier in the day. I saw the truck, just where we'd parked it, and that was the only sizable thing in sight for miles. The sand before and behind was disturbed as if something inordinately large had rolled, crawled, and swept by, all actions at once, but there were no droppings, no slime, nothing to specifically, empirically attest to the creature's presence. We actually spent the rest of the night out there, speaking to one another only when we needed something, a bottle of water, a bag of jerky, etc. We'd brought a radio, but neither of us bothered to use it. I had my earphones but didn't take them out or use my phone for anything. Having just witnessed something so profoundly weird, there wasn't anything on the internet that could have amused, entertained, or intrigued me. We both, for hours, sat in silence. I remember sleeping, but couldn't tell you if I dreamed. My brother never mentioned dreaming on that night either. In the morning we packed up our things, quietly walked back to the truck, and then drove back to his house. We had a farewell breakfast at a diner not too far from the airport, and then I flew back home. We didn't discuss the experience until almost a year later, both having needed time to process our thoughts. It wasn't like seeing a wild animal, or a car crash, or a building collapse, or anything worldly, mundane. There was an element of the unreal to it, something beyond the natural order of the earth and man's own creations. But at the same time, the thing had seemed so comfortable with our world, so relaxed and assured of its place among a planet of insects, wolves, starfish, and humans. I don't know what we saw, but I do know that's probably the last time I'll ever visit Arizona.
This might seem unbelievable to some people, but it is 100% true. It is burned into my memory and I will never forget it, even the small details. I present it to you exactly as it happened. I grew up in the high deserts and mountains of southeast Idaho. Most of my life has been spent outdoors, whether I was on the back of a horse pushing cattle for local ranchers or hunting elk, or on foot hunting rabbits and deer through the sagebrush. I was given my first .22 rifle when I was 9 years old and spent every minute I could out in the lava flows hunting rabbits, rock chucks, and sage hen. I remember several times that my mother or father would drop me and my best friend off somewhere along the lavas and pick us up at the same spot 3 or 4 days later after many miles of exploring and living off the land. All we would take is water, shells, and a knife. When I got older and had my own vehicles, my trips got longer and farther into the desert. As I write this, I can smell the sagebrush and feel the desert sun on my face. Suffice to say, I love that Idaho desert more than any place on earth. I feel more comfortable out in the desert, 30 miles from the closest person, than I do in my own living room. During the summer of 2001, I was south and slightly east of the Big Southern Butte. I had spent a couple of days looking for arrowheads. Everything had been pretty normal. I walked for miles, found a few arrowheads, saw a few coyotes and deer, pretty normal. At this time in my life, I always had my dog with me. He was a huge Chesapeake retriever that weighed over 100 pounds. He was very protective of me and my belongings, and was meaner than hell to anybody who acted suspicious.
Uh-oh. He's talking about his faithful dog in the past tense. That gives me the impression that his dog is no more.
Or threatening. His surly demeanor towards anybody who messed with me or my stuff earned him the name Kane with my family and friends. The name stuck. Kane loved to go anywhere I went. He loved to go out to the desert and run around, never getting too far away from me. I always felt very secure
Doggo
with
is
him around
deado.
because he had proved time and time again that he was aware of every living thing that approached us out in the desert. And if that thing was dangerous, whether human or animal, he held no qualms about tearing right into the middle of them. In fact, he enjoyed it. Anyway, we made it back to the pickup truck an hour or so before it got dark. I gathered up some juniper branches and sagebrush to make a fire. I cooked up some dinner for my dog and I and then settled into my hammock for the night. There is nothing better than sleeping in a hammock while outdoors. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of trees in the desert, so I would find a juniper or fence post, park my pickup close to it, and tie one end of my hammock to the pickup bed and one end to the tree or fence post. I spent many comfortable nights rigged up like this. This night was no different. I climbed into my hammock and was soon asleep. A couple of hours later, I woke up to raindrops. It had started raining pretty hard and I was getting pretty wet. I quickly threw all of my gear into my hammock, untied the end from the fence post, rolled it up with everything inside it, and tossed it into the back of my pickup with a tarp over it to keep it dry. With all of my gear safely stowed, Kane and I crawled into the cab of the pickup and settled in for a dry, if cramped, rest of the night. Around 3 a.m. in the morning, a strange sound woke me up. I was reclined back as best I could in the driver's seat and Kane was sitting up alert on the passenger side. He was growling very softly, and the hair on his shoulders and neck was standing straight up. A very menacing and intimidating sight. I am glad he was on my side. He was looking over my shoulder out the driver's side window. It was his quiet growling that woke me up. I didn't move but just opened my eyes and looked around by moving my eyes in their sockets. It had stopped raining and the clouds had gone away. The sky was now clear with a bright, almost full moon overhead. It was bright enough that I could see Kane very clearly. I wondered what he was focusing all of his attention on and lifted my hand up in front of his nose. I don't know why I did that, but that's what I did. He never even looked at me, but moved his head to the side so he could continue to watch whatever was out my driver's side window, continuing his quiet, threatening growl. I had never seen Kane so focused on anything the way he was now. It sent a shot of adrenaline through me and I was immediately wide awake. It gave me goosebumps and the hair stood up on my arms and my neck. I was scared to turn my head and look out the window. I wasn't sure that I wanted to see what was outside. I summoned the courage and slowly turned my head to the left and looked out my window. About 50 yards away, slightly behind the truck and slowly working its way closer towards me, was a large dark figure. In the bright moonlight I could see that this thing was covered in long, coarse hair. It was walking on 2 legs and moved like a man, but different. Its arms seemed longer, and it kind of had a swaying motion as it walked. The moon shone through the hair around the outside of its body, and the dark, solid shape underneath was visible. It was moving in slow steps towards the pickup. Every few steps it would stop, crouch down, and wait a few seconds before moving ahead a couple more steps, exactly as my dad had taught me to do while stalking deer and elk. I have no idea if this creature meant to do me harm, but seeing it move exactly as I did when putting the stalk on a deer, with me as the target of its attention, did not make me feel very warm and fuzzy inside. My mind was in overdrive. Imagine my reality of what exists and doesn't exist in this world was suddenly and without much fanfare turned upside down. At the same time, for the first time in my life, it would happen many more times in the near future in a crappy place called Iraq, genetically inherited, but deeply buried alarm bells were screaming inside my head. My subconscious recognized the danger and demanded that I do something while at the same time dumping bucket loads of adrenaline into my system. My thoughts jumped immediately to my pistol, and in the same instant I remembered that it was rolled up in my hammock in the back of my pickup under a tarp. Useless. Not that my pistol would do any good. As this thing got closer, I could see that it was big, probably 7 or 8 feet tall and solid. It moved like an animal that is very heavily built but is quick and fast at the same time, like a tiger maybe. Kane had gone from sitting to standing on the seat. His hair was standing straight up and his quiet growl had turned into a savage snarl. What a dog. Here is this monster outside my truck and my dog is ready for me to open the door and turn him loose. My mind quickly switched from fight mode to flight mode. My keys were in the ignition. Without taking my eyes off this thing, I reached up and started the pickup. The creature was less than 30 yards away now. When it heard the engine start, it crouched down lower to the ground than it had crouched before. The top of its pointy head was just above the level of a patch of sagebrush that happened to be between him and me. My pickup was nosed up to a lava rock wall. The only trail out was to my right and behind. There were large lava rocks scattered on the ground, so I had to make an over 180-degree turn while backing up to be lined up with the road. I threw the truck in reverse and floored it by turning on my lights at the same time. As I swung through the turn, my high beams swung right across the creature. It had put its head down, probably to protect it from the glare, and all I saw was the top of its head. I noticed a massive horse, dark gray hair before its shape was swallowed by the darkness. I drove down that 2-track desert roadway faster than I normally would. My truck was bouncing over rocks and plowing over sagebrush when the curves were too sharp to take at that speed. Kane and I were bouncing all over the inside. I drove that way for several miles, continuously looking behind me until I calmed down enough to slow down. I drove out to a main road and stopped to mentally go over what I had just seen. But stopping out there in the dark was too much. I ended up cutting my trip short and just went home. This was a long post, but I hope that I could convey a small amount of the effect that this experience had on me.
Back in the spring of 2016, a
Oh,
few of my
I
friends
thought his
were
dog was
talking
gonna
about their
bite it.
experience with some weird creature in the desert southeast of Tucson near Vail, Arizona. The description sounded a lot like Mothman, though this creature had no wings. I was skeptical, but I didn't want to doubt my friends because whatever this was had really scared them. They said that they believed it was some kind of alien being. Later on that year, in the winter, these sightings were far from my mind. I was visiting a friend who lived in Vail. I stayed over late that evening. At about 2 a.m. I left their house to drive about 25 minutes down I-10 towards home. Driving about 50 miles per hour, when approaching a rise in the road, I saw a silhouette. Before I even processed that I was observing something, I soon realized that I had slowed and eventually stopped on the shoulder to get a better view. It was about 20 yards or so away, standing almost in the middle of the road. Because of the rise in the road, I could only see this form from the hips up. It was very tall and looked human-like. Very skinny, with long thin arms and skin that was dark, leathery and dry, though there was a sheen to the body. The eyes were a reflective red color. I couldn't tell if it was looking at me or not. There wasn't another car in sight at the time. I'm usually very calm during emergency situations. I'm very interested in unexplained phenomena, but confronting this thing, the panic switch flipped. My mind is telling me to hit the gas, but I just sit there, staring at this thing. I looked down for a second, considering turning around, driving back to my friend's house. I put the car in first gear, looked back up, and the being was gone. I immediately drove towards my house. I was shivering uncontrollably the whole way home. I pulled
Shiver
into
me
the driveway,
timbers.
walked in the kitchen door, and became violently ill. I literally passed out in my bathroom. I didn't wake until about 1 p.m. that day. I dragged myself off the bathroom floor and immediately went to bed. I was totally exhausted and just wanted to sleep. I rarely left the bedroom for the next 5 days. I had no appetite and it seemed like every bone on my body ached. One of my friends eventually came over and helped me into the living room. I ate a little bit, but I was still very tired and despondent. I didn't tell her or anyone else what I had encountered. I just said that I had the flu. Do you have any idea of what I observed out in the desert? Have you heard of similar creatures?
Okay, I think we reached a good breaking point to allow me to take a break. So we're done with the sketch. This is looking pretty good. I just scaled it up right just now. And start detailing it a bit more, and then we'll get into the inkings. And Melody says, go and nap, Squish. Okay, that sounds good. All right, hope you all enjoyed. Not many viewers this time around. Because I didn't sling that many links, or I didn't sling any links at all. I just figured like people were getting tired of me. Oh, this guy's asking for donations again. Oh, I'm so sick of him. Anyway, to those who are watching later, if you like what you saw, please subscribe, ring that notification bell, like, comment, all that good stuff. And if you're able to and you're like willing to do so, there's a donation link at the description section below. It'll take you to my Ko-fi page, and there you can donate any dollar amount. Any amount you can give would be very much appreciated. So until next time, this has been Johnston Blackhorse, the one and only, and I shall check y'all later. Sweet. Bye.